Let's dive right into this explainer and look at a massive, truly fascinating mystery. How sprawling, highly advanced empires from across the globe seemingly just vanish from the historical record. When you think of history's heavy hitters, your mind probably jumps straight to the ones we know intimately, right? The societies with towering monuments and extensive, well-preserved libraries. But what about the behemoths that simply evaporated from our memory?
So how does a whole advanced civilization just disappear? Usually we picture some Hollywood-style apocalyptic destruction, a sudden natural disaster or a cataclysmic war that wipes everyone completely off the map. But what if disappearing isn't about physical destruction at all, but actually about the total erasure of a society's historical records and legacy? It turns out, ancient civilizations usually didn't just physically vanish overnight. Instead, the very memory of who they were was slowly wiped clean.
Here's our roadmap for understanding the anatomy of erasure. We'll start with the mystery of missing history, then look at what happens when things are lost to the spoken word, examine the unbreakable code, explore the house of cards collapse, and finally ask, will we disappear too? Let's move to part 1, lost to the spoken word, the fragility of memory.
Think about this for a second. There is a huge, stark contrast between civilizations that survived in memory through the written word, like Egypt or Greece, and those that stored their complex knowledge entirely in vulnerable oral traditions. Imagine if instead of just searching the internet or going to a library to learn something, you had to physically track down a city storyteller to sing you a highly specific song. It's an incredibly beautiful way to share knowledge, but man, it leaves information in a highly vulnerable position. If there's no one left to tell the story simply ceases to exist.
To put this into perspective, look at Great Zimbabwe. Between the 11th and 16th centuries, the Shona people constructed these jaw-dropping, precision-cut, mortarless stone walls up to 36 feet high. They supported a bustling population of up to 20,000 people and ran massive trade networks stretching all the way to China and India. But they didn't have a written language. So because their entire cultural memory was verbal, their story began to fade the absolute moment the society started to decline. Their rich history just started slipping through the cracks. And it actually gets worse. When European colonists later rediscovered these ruins, their heavy biases led them to utterly reject the local oral histories as mere urban legends. They ironically ignored the legacy of a society that actually entered the Iron Age centuries before Europe did. The colonists literally couldn't believe their eyes, so they made up these absurd theories that anyone, the Phoenicians, Arabs, Egyptians, anyone but the local Africans had built these magnificent structures. By the time modern scholars finally accepted the truth, countless invaluable oral traditions had already been permanently lost.
We see a very similar vulnerability with the Polynesian Voyagers. Between 1300 BC and 1250 AD, they basically mastered the Pacific Ocean. They navigated thousands of miles of open water in canoes, without compasses or maps, using stars, ocean swells, and even bird flight patterns. But here's the catch. This crucial survival knowledge was kept as strict guild secrets, encoded and taught entirely in song, because, space in a canoe is limited, you can't bring a library. But because their society was built on the spoken word, losing a song literally meant losing the map itself.
Which brings us to our next culprit in part 2, the unbreakable code, secrets of the Indus Valley.
So, not writing things down is one thing. But what if a society does write things down, and it's a completely unbreakable code? Over 7,000 years ago, the Indus Valley Civilization was an absolute behemoth. They stretched 900 miles across modern-day northwest India and Pakistan, hitting a peak population of up to 5 million people. This made them a true contemporary heavyweight alongside ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, commanding vast swaths of territory and human capital. And they were unbelievably advanced for 7000 BC. They laid out their cities in strict grid patterns, using a standardized, high-quality baked brick system. Pretty much every house had clean running water and personal sewage systems. They even had built-in ventilation and wind catchers for early air conditioning. The level of standardization shows a society running with just incredible precision and administrative oversight, which brings us to a massive historical contradiction. With all this staggering advancement and extensive trade with Mesopotamia, why don't we know their names? We don't know who their rulers were, we don't know what laws they lived by, we don't even know what they called themselves. We have all the physical evidence of a thriving superpower, but the intimate, human details of their daily life, their religion, and their history, it's just a total blank space in our understanding.
Their history remains a total black box because of a few really frustrating details. As you can see here, the Indus script has about 400 to 700 distinct symbols. But the sequences are incredibly brief, usually a max of just 5 symbols in a row. Because it's so short, you just can't analyze their grammar or syntax. Actually, some scholars even debate if it's a spoken language at all, or just non-linguistic symbols. And because it's completely isolated, with no bilingual Rosetta Stone to act as a translation key, statisticians and linguists are totally stuck. They're locked out of their own legacy forever.
All right, let's examine our final catastrophic mechanism of erasure in Part 3, the House of Cards collapse, the Bronze Age.
Back during the Late Bronze Age in the Eastern Mediterranean, superpowers like the New Kingdom of Egypt, the Hittites, and Greece were linked by this early form of globalization. They ran on what's called a palace economy. Basically, this is a highly centralized structure where a royal palace acts as the absolute heart of the society, holding total administrative, economic, and religious control. They gather all the raw materials and redistribute the wealth to the citizens. When this finely tuned machine worked, it made everyone incredibly prosperous. But it was also dangerously fragile.
Because these empires were so heavily codependent, a single interruption in the supply chain caused a perfect storm. We don't know the exact order of events, but imagine a house of cards. Say a prolonged drought leads to crop failures and famines. Suddenly, the centralized palace has zero food to distribute. The starving citizens riot, causing civil unrest that severely weakens the city-state's defenses. That rolls out the red carpet for foreign invasions. Because all these empires relied on one another for trade, one falling card brought the whole region crashing down in just a few decades. Total societal collapse.
And as these cities burned and populations starved, the knowledge of complex writing systems was utterly abandoned. Over just a 50-year span, from 1200 BC to 1150 BC, we see a great collapse of literacy. I mean, think about it. When people are dying and buildings are turning to ash, the meticulous record-keeping of the palace economies simply ceases to matter. Survival becomes the literal only priority. Because of this incredibly rapid deconstruction, entire languages were just abandoned, creating a massive, unfillable gap in our historical knowledge of the era.
Which leads us to Part 4. What will our legacy be, looking forward? Now, humanity is undeniably resilient, right? The ashes of the Bronze Age eventually gave way to a decentralized, technologically advanced Iron Age. But exploring these erased empires leaves us with a really provocative final thought. History is essentially a graveyard of societies that thought they would last absolutely forever, only to have their records, their languages, and their memories wiped from the face of the earth. Today, we store almost everything in the cloud, essentially relying on an invisible, digital oral tradition. If our highly interconnected global supply chains were to ever fail and our digital servers powered down, without a digital Rosetta Stone, will our history disappear too? If the power turns off for good, we really have to wonder if future explorers will look at our ruins and find us just as mysterious.
If you enjoyed this video and want to watch more amazing content like this, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.